HRN listeners. As we celebrate our 15th year, we are deepening our commitment to giving voice to the next generation of food systems storytellers, and we need your help. Our internship and fellowship programs help activate new possibilities for underrepresented and underestimated young people through experiential journalism, audio engineering, and production training. Through these unique programs, HRN helps food equity stewards build essential workforce readiness skills that expand their potential and foster economic mobility. Please consider supporting these critical programs. And with a minimum donation, you can be entered to win a dinner for two at an amazing restaurant in one of 8 cities and tickets to a concert at a great venue in one of those cities. We have incredible partners across the country who have donated, as they also share our passion for helping to educate the next generation of food systems storytellers. Check out heritageradionetwork.org/15 to donate and enter to win today. That's heritageradionetwork.org/15 to donate and enter to win today. And make sure you donate before March 31st. Thank you.
This episode is brought to you by Wisconsin Cheese. The great state of Wisconsin is home to the only master cheesemaking program outside of Switzerland. Learn more about Wisconsin's cheesemaking history at wisconsincheese.com.
This week on Meat and Three, we're examining the true cost of convenience when it comes to when, where, and how we eat.
Dark stores enable workers to eat without any kind of thought to how they're getting their food or how it might have come to be.
DoorDash, Uber, and Lyft in the past have pledged to spend $90 million to try to exempt themselves from the law.
I could be wrong, but I think there's going to be significant regulatory pushback on driverless trucks.
Tune in to Meat and Three, HRN's weekly food news roundup, wherever you listen to podcasts.
Welcome to the Grape Nation, your weekly wine journey. Our guest is Isabelle Legeron. We'll talk to Isabelle about natural wine, raw wine, and the Raw Wine Fair. I'm your host, Sam Ben-Ruby. Stay with us for the Grape Nation on the Heritage Radio Network. We bring wine to the people. Isabelle Legeron is a master of wine, consulting, contributing journalist, and author of the seminal book on natural wine, An Introduction to Organic and Biodynamic Wines Made Naturally. Isabelle is the founder and creator of Raw Wine and the Raw Wine Fairs. She is leading the charge globally for greater transparency and promotes growers who work organically, who ferment their wines naturally, and use little to no additives. Raw Wine Fairs are now in London, Berlin, Miami, Los Angeles, Montreal, and New York. Welcome back to the Grape Nation, Isabelle.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you so much for having me again on the show. I love chatting to you.
It's my pleasure. A few quick notes I just wanted to point out. This is Isabelle's 4th appearance on the show. Isabelle is the only guest that's ever appeared 4 times on the Grape Nation. We had her on 4 years ago when she brought her first Raw Wine Fair to Brooklyn, not far from the Heritage Radio Studios. And also, on another note, Isabelle, in celebration of Heritage Radio Network's 10th anniversary, has been inducted into our Hall of Fame for all her great work. So congrats on all of that, Isabelle, and thank you.
Thank you. I felt very honored.
Thanks. All right, so I want to get into a few things about the wine world, natural wine world, and talk, amply about the Raw Wine Fair. I wanted you to sort of give me an assessment, an update, or tell me where the natural wine movement is today. I know that's a very broad question, so you approach it the way you want. And I always wonder, with different guests at different times, is the word natural still the right word? So tell me where things are at.
the world of natural wine, of low intervention, organic, biogenuine wines, I think have evolved, tremendously over the past few years. I think, before you would come across places where you could drink natural wine in big cities, in London, in Paris, in New York. And over the past 3 or 4 years, I think that the scene has really expanded, and you're seeing more and more shops popping up and bars and restaurants sort of being created. So I think, around the world, we're seeing a big push, a big increase in drinking these wines. And I think we're also, as a result, seeing that the growers, for them, it's getting easier and easier to find markets to the wines.
Right.
And that's why we actually brought, the fair to Miami. I mean, this is just a one-off event, but, I had many requests from importers and distributors in Miami who felt that Florida was changing, that the culture of maybe drinking liquor, beer, cocktails was shifting slowly towards drinking more and more wine. And they felt that, the natural wine scene was being nascent, and actually we could have a festival and a fair to celebrate these wines.
Right. So that's why you went to Miami. I mean, I would sense that down the road there may be a similar pull or need in other markets besides your core markets, right?
Yes, exactly. And I think it's also partly to help the growers, because I get a lot of comments from growers who are saying now, New York is getting really well established. Similarly, in LA, things have changed a lot over the past 2 or 3, 4 years again. And so for them, they are keen to meet new people, to expand the horizon a little bit. So we, that's why we took the fair, for example, to Miami. And indeed, there will be other pop-ups like this where hopefully we can work with the importers and the local restaurants and help boost a little bit what's going on, and then, go to another place. That's also why, raw wine has always been a place to taste the wines, but it's always been a place to help growers and importers do business.
We can't forget that. So things are good. I mean, there's just more awareness and more wine. Agreed, right?
Yes, exactly. So it's I think we're in a virtuous cycle now where the like you said, there's more awareness. So people are seeking more and more drinks that are made in line with their beliefs. So, people are obviously very aware of the environment. They're very careful about, what they eat and drink, and they want their choices to have a positive impact, on the planet. Right. And that's growing, that's a growing trend. So that then, the virtuous consequence of that is that, there's more demand for the growers. And I know that some growers are actually now struggling to satisfy this demand, which in itself comes with another maybe set of problems.
So my next question was, and you jumped right into it, what are some of the challenges? So demand, because of the awareness and popularity, is sometimes stronger than what a farmer can produce, right?
Yes. So what we're seeing, sorry.
Go ahead.
No, so what we're seeing is some growers are in a way growing. They're maybe planting more. They're converting more vineyards from maybe neighbors. They're also buying grapes to satisfy the demand. And there's always a risk, where are the grapes coming from? So now part of the assessment to come into the fair, I also ask quite a lot of questions about where the grapes are coming from. Because I think, now, when a grower is quite famous, and sometimes it's quite tempting to just increase the production without necessarily following the same philosophy. But that happens sometimes, but that's a very, that's very rare cases.
Right.
What I'm seeing is more and more new growers, young growers who maybe were working before with other growers and who are starting to buy grapes or buying, a little plot of land, particularly in Europe. I mean, in the US is a very different story.
Right.
And that's really lovely, to see that I'm getting samples from people who it's their first, second, or third vintage.
Wow.
And for them, they're coming into a place where I think if you make really good wine, and if you are indeed, conscious about the environment, and if you're indeed making the wine naturally, and you can tell your story and you can package it properly, I think actually it's quite easy now to find a route to market.
Right.
Which really 10 years ago was a completely different story. So I think that the environment is prime for, a lot of, new producers coming and feeling encouraged that actually, you can, if you can do it well and the product is really good, then you can definitely find somebody to buy it and drink it.
So is it fair to say that, we're getting into the second or the next generation of natural winemakers?
Yeah, I think so. And in a way, let's say that the first generation or the people who were, who did so much groundbreaking work by being, the first to make these wines, and by trying to be commercially viable, I think that generation is really selling the wines quite easily.
Right.
And what we're seeing now is what I'm seeing anyway, and that's always why what I wanted Raw Wine to be about is a real platform for people to meet new producers, new importers. So I'm seeing an influx more of younger producers who have more of a need to, I would say, to meet people and to sell their wines.
Right.
But there's also the other challenge that we're seeing, obviously, is that because natural wine is becoming so popular, you're seeing some maybe bigger wineries who are, trying to sort of like make one natural wine.
Right. But that's why at the top of the show I said, is the word natural still the right word? And it possibly could be misused by those guys, or not necessarily?
Yes, I mean, and it is definitely, I think, misused. I think natural is for me is the right word. What's missing with this word is some sort of definition which is recognized by all of us.
Right.
Because at the moment it's just an empty word. We know what it means. You know what it means. I know what it means. People in the inner circle know what natural wine is. But I'm seeing more and more wines out there who, I would definitely not call being called natural, and,
right.
and so I think it's still the right word. I can't think of a better word for the time being.
So I don't want you to define it again, because you've taken the pains of, in raw wine, there's a whole decree of, what it is and what it should be. But, just tell people sort of the core tenets of, the most important things, which maybe a big corporate wine company trying to be natural probably won't follow.
So, first of all, I would like to make a distinction between, a natural wine, which for me is, obviously farmed organically, but where there hasn't been any additive, no sulfites, nothing added,
right.
fermented on their own yeast and so on. And then a low intervention wine, which is still organic, still fermented on their own yeast, and perhaps, it's been fined and perhaps it has had a little bit of sulfites added to it.
Right.
And at the fair, I'm just careful of that because, raw wine is not about natural wine. It's about natural, but also low intervention organic and biodynamic wine. So we're a slightly bigger family than just, I would say, natural wines. But, fundamentally, I would say that what unites the growers who come to the fair is that they all really care about the farming, but not in an agro organic sort of big scale way. They really care about the biodiversity. They really care about the soil life.
Right.
They really care that the bees come to the vineyard. It's more than just a clean farming just to tick the boxes. It's also about putting back. It's about building the topsoils. It's about making sure that you encourage as many different species of insects to come, that you really care about, the rainworms underground to make sure that your population is growing rather than depleting the population. So it's people who are really observant and who, in a way, apply their own lifestyle to their vineyard. It's like a very holistic approach.
Right.
They're the people who they will come to the fair and they will do the farming and they will do the winemaking. So they're family businesses, really, family farms.
Right.
And then when we bring the grapes in, it's important that all the yeast population, which is from that vintage, from that vineyard, from that soil, comes in and is completely respected. So it ferments by itself with all the various millions of different strains of yeast that will all contribute to the biodiversity of the taste of the wine. For me, that yeasts are really part of terroir, and they're very important.
Sure.
The moment you start adding, yeast, you eradicate a lot of that year's work.
Right.
And then you let you let the time do its job, so the fermentation will happen over probably a much longer period of time. There's a lot of elements, but I would say the most important element is really the farming, and that the farming is done with utter respect,
Right.
but also not just for the sake of not applying any synthetic pesticides or weed killers and so on, but more about how can I really increase the biodiversity and the life of the soil and the life of my vineyards.
The bigger picture and, for future generations. I mean, you hear the word permaculture a lot more. I think people have been practicing that for a long time, but you sort of alluded to that, where the whole health and vibrancy of a vineyard or an area is everything cohabitating, whether it's other plants, animals, and that helps the liveliness of the land. True?
Absolutely, and then you can talk about sustainability. Sustainability is when you manage to have in your vineyard and in the plants in your vineyard, that not just the vines but the trees, the whole flora. When you manage to have that in such balance and equilibrium that not one disease will take over,
Right.
because there will be such a diversity
Right.
of plants, of insects, that everybody has their place. For me, that's what's so important. It's like in a society, every single individual has a place and has a part to play. And you don't really talk about weeds if you have a holistic view. You talk about just plants and why is this plant in this particular place at this particular moment.
Right.
That's sustainability. This is when you're getting to a sustainable vineyard that can actually operate, obviously with our help, but is healthy and full of life and able to basically fight off, challenges and pressures that might come from, a surge in a certain bacteria or a certain insect or a certain disease.
Right. You're not just, it's not a monoculture. You have everything so that it feeds off of each other. Are there other challenges? I mean, climate change, is that making it more difficult for the farmer? Is cost, these wines going up where people are starting to think? Is perception, still good? Is there still non-participation of a large number of farmers, and winemakers that don't care about this? What are some of the continuing challenges?
So, climate change is obviously a big challenge. If you speak to any growers, if you come to the fair and do a poll, it's making their lives very difficult. It's bringing up certain pressure from disease that maybe they had never seen before.
Right.
Obviously, they're losing crop through frost, through hail,
Right.
and hail, but
Well, hail is hell.
So hell is hell, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. So they're losing crop. Sometimes the heat will be such that the vine will shut down over 2 or 3 weeks in the summer, which will cause problems for the ripening season. Climate change is obviously a big challenge.
So that's not going to change with the flip of a switch. So that means all these farmers, have to adopt, everything you described. They have to figure a way to work through that, right? Not easy.
Yeah, not easy. I mean, I think some people are looking more closely at practices like biodynamics, which really helps balance, the vine's ability to maybe store water, keep fresh, even though the heat is there. They're noticing that maybe it helps preserve the level of acidity, for example, in vine. Mulching is a really great way of preserving humidity and making sure that there's a lot of humus and there's a lot of life, underneath. People are questioning maybe plowing. Is plowing a great technique when actually you're losing a lot of water through evaporation, ground cover? People are. Yeah. I think you have to resort and be even more observant and look for obviously other solutions, because it is obviously it's a big challenge.
Right. Do you see others? Sure. I mean, climate change probably is top of the list, but anything kind of biting away at you, challenge-wise?
What do you mean, in the vineyard, or?
Just in general, whatever comes to mind, whether it's the farmer, the wine, the winemaker, like I said, perception, cost,
I think, look, you mentioned earlier, are we seeing, why are so many people still really reluctant to embrace, I would say, even just organic farming? And that's an interesting question. I was chatting with one of our producers, actually, Frank Jorn from Germany, who has 3 hectares, but also consults for 180 farmers.
Wow.
I think in total he works with about 10,000 hectares of vineyard in Europe, and he has. And I had this exact same conversation with him, and I said, why? Because his argument is very simple. He manages to get the same level of cropping as with a conventional vineyard. The costs are not that much higher, especially since you do not use any products which are actually very, very expensive. And I said to him, so why do you think that so few people are actually taking up, organic farming? And he said, in his opinion, from his conversation, is fear that people do not understand really the tenets of organic farming. People are quite scared they will be losing their crop. I think there's a lot of misinformation about this. And I would, and it still beats me to see that, if you look around the world, we're still at about 5-7% of the world's vineyard are farmed organically.
That's it?
Yeah, I think something like that. It's quite small. When you think that there is, and most of those are located in France, Italy, and Spain.
Right.
When you see that actually, the public really wants it. There is such pressure from an environmental perspective to be less polluting. It really beats me. I don't really have the answer, but I think there is still this perception that organic farming is more difficult and it's more costly, and you get less grapes. But I think a properly managed vineyard actually will yield a very similar crop, and you get better value, because often you can sell your grapes or your wine for more money.
Right.
Anyway, you get the added value of producing a organic, low intervention, biodynamic, natural wine.
Plus, you're going back to a healthier soil base year in, year out, right?
And plus, it's the long-term investment exactly for the future generation. The level of erosion. I really invite everybody who's listening to, next time you walk around the countryside, and maybe next time you walk around vineyards, is to look at the level of erosion everywhere. I.e., where, because the soil, the earth is bare because there's nothing growing really. Whenever it rains, the soil is really getting depleted, and we're losing millions of tons of earth true erosion a year. I really invite people to look at the state of vineyards properly. Don't spend too much time in the tasting room, but ask people to take you to the vineyard and ask questions. Ask, why is there nothing growing in between those rows? Because, a vineyard which is farmed organically will always be vibrant with grass. I mean, obviously in the summer months it gets all dried, and depending on where you are. But I think we as a consumer, as a wine drinker, we just need to ask more questions and be more demanding, with wineries, because it's all very well to have these premium premium wine clubs, very expensive wines, these very expensive tasting rooms. But I think we need to ask people, what are they doing, to make sure that what they're farming will be here in 100 years.
Right, that's so important.
Yeah.
I'm curious about this. Does natural wine, the wine itself, the movement, does it have to move into the mainstream or be part of the mainstream? I mean, it's not a fringe movement by any stretch, but does it have to move into the mainstream, whether it's at restaurants or how it's covered in magazines, or it could flourish as it is and grows bigger? What's your feeling on that?
Well, I think it's still a very, very niche movement. It's easy to forget that we are in our own little bubbles, right? Because of the places where we go to eat. And I mean, I only go and eat somewhere if they have natural wine. Otherwise,
and that's not a lot. So you're right.
And it's not a lot.
It's not fringe, but it's more niche in that sense, right?
Yeah, it's more niche in that sense.
Yeah.
I think, does it need to go? I think we do need to expand a little bit and touch more people, because my personal vision is that we have to change how things are done. We have to inspire more and more people to at least farm organically.
Right.
And so I think for that to happen, we do need to move into. I'm not saying it will never be mass. But I think it's important that, every restaurant should be carrying at least one or two natural wine, as a choice. I think a well-balanced wine list, even if you are, in a top-end restaurant where people are probably going to be looking for, some, mainstream,
right,
blue champagne and Bordeaux and Burgundy and so on. I think it's a duty to from the sommelier or from the person who looking after the list to be able to offer these wines. But there is I'm also very, very convinced that people are not always ready. You can take a horse to water, but it's not necessarily going to drink.
Right.
And I think
regardless of best efforts.
Yes,
right.
Exactly. Some people are actually just not ready to listen to this. It's also about a personal journey. And I think, in a way, people who are attracted to these wines are people who at home will follow a very similar philosophy, who will be quite careful maybe of not eating too much meat, right, and who will be, quite sensitive to green issues, because they're ready, and I think people who come to the fair because they've heard of natural wine. It intrigues them. They like the idea of drinking something which is delicious, but which also has a much bigger picture.
Right. And, you make a point there. I think people, the oldest story is, people have been eating organic food for years, and they look at wine like, why? So that has to carry over a lot more. But I think awareness, I agree. I don't think it has to go in the mainstream, but I think it should be available in the mainstream. Like you said, a restaurant should have options. And I think awareness in the mainstream is important for the product and for the farming part, that more people should move towards, organic farming. I agree with that. One thing that drives me crazy, and I've been doing the show 3 years already, and starting with you coming on, for the fourth time, the growth of natural wines in the movement, in the market on the show has been crazy. But the thing that drives me crazy is, natural wine's about knowledge and conversation. I still don't get why the natural wine conversation is so divisive. It's so much us or them. You know, there's not a lot. Do you agree?
I think it's changing, though.
For the better, I hope.
I see. Yes, I think it's definitely getting better. I see this kind of like slightly divisive conversation, I would say, in more conservative traditional markets like in Germany, where people are quite, they're quite determined that the wine that they're drinking will be a very specific way and made in a very specific way, and whatever else, is really, frankly, not worth thinking about. But I think in terms of, in more sort of, I would say, advanced, relaxed markets, or places like New York, like Los Angeles, like London,
right.
Even the traditional wine trade, I think, is now realizing that natural wine plays a part, and I think realizing that actually natural wine and the conversation around natural wine has been positive, because I think the whole wine industry has started to think more about how actually wines is made, and it's starting to be a little bit more transparent.
Right.
I think for years people never really discussed sort of the type of selected yeast and all the stuff that goes into the wine that actually makes the wine.
Right.
It's a certain yeast that bring out certain flavors, certain type of oak, certain type of enzymes and vitamins and color and all of this. You can literally just make whatever you want. And I think the conversation around natural wine and us promoting the fact that it's just really good farming and grapes and grape juice has had a positive impact. So I would say that, I don't get the same level of sort of, I would say, quite horrible comments
right.
that I would 12 years ago, 10 years ago. I think things are changing and people are accepting that actually there is a place for these wines. And, for the record, are actually, for me, the most important is the farming. So I think everybody, and I think I've said that to you before, everybody should absolutely be farming organically. Once the grapes hit the winery, then if people want to add yeast and tons of sulfites, sterile filter, and add, glycerol to help with the mouthfeel and add whatever they want, gum arabic or whatever they want, then I think they should be able to do that. The issue is they should also have to declare it, whereas at the moment there's no way of knowing.
Right.
But the most important is really the farming.
Right. That's the base.
The winemaking.
And I agree with that. And the second point, transparency. If people want to do it, people should just know that it's there. Isabelle, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, I want to talk more specifically about the Raw Wine Fair. So we're talking to Isabelle Legeron from Raw Wine and the Raw Wine Fair. You're listening to The Grape Nation. We'll be right back.
This episode is brought to you by Wisconsin Cheese. Did you know that 90% of Wisconsin's milk is made into cheese? And this is not just any milk. When Swiss, German, and Italian cheesemakers first settled into Wisconsin, they chose their new home because of the special terroir of the region. Its soil and water are nurtured by the goodness of glacial sediment, and those elements lend themselves to the very best milk. Today, Wisconsin produces 25% of all cheeses made in the U.S., and Wisconsin cheeses have won more awards than any other state or country in the world. How did they do it? Wisconsin cheesemakers combined their heritage and tradition with nonstop innovation. They were the first state to establish cheese grade standards and the first to require that every cheese plant be overseen by a licensed cheesemaker. Wisconsin is the only place outside of Europe where one can pursue an elite master cheesemaker certification. All of these impeccably high standards mean Wisconsin produces more than 48% of the nation's specialty cheese.
Are you enjoying this podcast? Heritage Radio Network has plenty more. It's Todd Shulkin, the host of Inside Julia's Kitchen here on HRN. Inside Julia's Kitchen carries on Julia Child's legacy of introducing the brightest lights in the food world to a wider audience, just as Julia did from her home kitchen. Look for Inside Julia's Kitchen wherever you listen to podcasts and on heritageradionetwork.org.
All right, we're back. We're back.
Okay.
We're back with my guest, Isabelle Legeron. Isabelle, let's talk about the raw wine fairs themselves, something that I know that you work very hard on and travel around, and there's a lot of moving parts. I've participated in it and I've seen it, up close. So you're doing 6 fairs now?
Yes, we are, and 5 this autumn, which is a little bit crazy.
Yeah, and you talked earlier, Miami you added, but let's talk about the markets. The raw wine fairs are coming up. We're in raw wine fair season, so let's sort of go through the calendar quickly.
So we kick off in Montreal,
right,
at the end of October.
I'll post all the dates too.
Okay, yeah. So we kick off in Montreal. Then a couple of days later, we are in New York for 2 days. Then we stop over in Miami in the middle of the week, and then we end up in Los Angeles the following weekend. So we have literally 10 days of heavy traveling, not much sleeping, a lot of partying, and a lot of growers arriving en masse. I think in total, with those 4 fairs, we have something like 270 different growers.
Right. So some will travel fair to fair, and some fairs will have some growers that won't make it to others. True.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Exactly. I mean, everybody is basically choosing the fair they want to do depending on the market.
Right.
If it's a strong market, not a strong market, if they're looking for distribution or more distribution.
It gives them the option. Now, Montreal is 2 days?
So Montreal is, last year we did it for 1 day, and then
This year's 2?
Yeah, this year we had to grow it to 2 days. Also, people, they're like 100 growers, so you need really 2 days to be able to take and explore everyone.
New York is 2 days. LA is 2 days. What's Miami? 1 day or
Miami is just 1 day.
Okay.
Yeah, Miami is quite a small event for us. We have, I think, 70 growers who are coming, which I think is probably one of the biggest representation of growers, in Miami, because I don't think there's been very many natural wine events happening in Miami, so it's very exciting.
I would agree. I mean, I think you're going to hit the ground running there. And just as a side thing, the festival started in London, and you're also in Berlin. Those are the 6 markets. I read somewhere that the Berlin Fair has sort of become a hub for, Russian interest in natural wines. Is that true?
Yeah, that's true.
Is there a market there?
Well, yes, there is actually quite an interesting market. I mean, particularly we're talking about Moscow and St. Petersburg, but it's a very interesting market because it's quite a high-end market. So people love all the small grower champagne,
right?
All the sort of natural low intervention Burgundies and Bordeaux's, and so there's a really great market there. I mean, it's not. I think it will grow a lot more, but it's an interesting crowd because I think Russian, for a lot of Russians, wine is very new,
right?
So they don't necessarily have a fixed idea as to what a particular wine should taste like. So they're incredibly open. I launched my book there last year in Russian, and within 3 months they sold out of all the copies.
So there's a huge appetite. For information and product.
Yeah, exactly. And they really want, like you said, they really want information.
Yeah.
And they're really open to new flavors, to new things, to new wines. So it's a very interesting market. And a lot of Russians live in Berlin.
Really?
They do the commute because for them to go into Berlin, I mean, this is getting into the detail, but you don't need a specific visa because it's part of an agreement.
Right.
So it makes it very simple for them. So we get
why
a lot
they're
of
there. That makes sense. It would be hard not to follow up and say, where does China fit in on all of this? I mean, you're talking about a huge populace, but I mean, I think they're behind, wine-wise in a lot of ways. Is that a tough market? Is that down the road, or you can't think about that now?
So for us, maybe the nearest market will be Japan.
Okay.
And Japan is actually a very big market for the natural wine producers. A lot of them sell quite a lot of wines there, and a lot of them actually started selling in Japan, a long time ago.
Right.
So it's a very historical market, and it's a very faithful market. So when people buy from certain growers, they keep on buying. It's a
Right.
So I was there not long ago, actually, just exploring the place and looking for potential, partners.
Right.
Um,
So for
it's,
Asia, that would be the next natural, market.
Yes, for us, but I know that in China, there's a few things happening, and obviously growers are starting to sell there. But China, we had quite a few Chinese buyers who came to London actually this year, and they come and talk to the growers. But for them, they're like, okay, so I would like these amount of containers of your wines. And then the growers were like, well, I only make 20,000 bottles, so
Right.
I can't really give you a container.
Yeah, it's tough.
So it's, and that's something that I really love about what I do as well is I'm, I feel quite close to what's happening, on the ground and hearing all the grower stories and understanding, where they sell their wines or where they don't sell their wines and why. It's fascinating because you really get the culture coming through basically from different countries. It's really fascinating.
Well, just like a farmer is in the field and really seeing and feeling everything, you're the same. I mean, you're out in the market talking to the people that, make all this happen in every way. So being on the ground is important. Has the mission of the fair, has it changed or evolved at all since you launched your first fairs?
So we obviously now the fairs themselves are, I would say, quite established. So I'm not really looking, maybe apart from one or two destinations, not necessarily looking to grow, the fairs as such. I've been working really hard we've been working on a couple of things. I mean, the first one is I've been working a lot on our website to make our website the things you don't see in the website. But the technology behind the website has changed quite a lot. We've redesigned it 3 times now.
Right.
And even though it kind of looks the same, but we actually have a lot of information about growers, and I really want this website, which is free for everybody and anybody. The growers don't pay anything, and we host we have, I think now over 1,000 growers, I think, on the website, or maybe not quite that, but we have hundreds of growers on the website, and they each have a microsite, which is theirs, to do whatever they want.
It's an incredible resource.
Yeah, which is, and we get something like 45,000 different unique users a month of people literally just taking the information from the growers to look how the wine is made. And I really want to grow this because I think, finding reliable information about how wines are made is actually not that simple. Because people say, oh, this wine has no added sulfites, and then I have all the analysis, and I know that this one has had 40 parts added, but there's not really. So we're trying to grow the website so it becomes more and more of a resource outside of the fairs.
Right.
So it's just,
or to support it before, during, and after the fairs, and an ongoing thing. Just if anybody wants to access that website, how do they get there? Is it
rawwine.com,
Okay.
rawwine.com.
It's
and then the
simple.
other thing, if I may, is that we're looking at carbon footprint quite a bit at the moment. So we're working with carbon footprint specialists in Italy, and I'm developing. So we're funding a program to develop a tool. So I'm working with 6 farmers, 6 of our growers. And we're trying to develop a very simple tool so people can measure their own carbon footprint very easily.
Great.
Because taking into account route to market, taking part in fairs, and so on. So that's something that I'm very interested in because I think it's easy to forget, that actually, we also have a responsibility to be carbon neutral or even carbon sinks if we can.
Right.
And then we're working with these same consultants at the moment where I'm trying to measure our own carbon footprint. So what is my carbon footprint of putting on a fair in New York with having 3,000 or 4,000 people come to New York, some of them traveling. So we're looking at ways of assessing their impact. So we take that on and then offset it by, we're looking at a project at the moment to plant trees. So we're doing that at the moment for the New York Fair will be like our pilot.
Right. That's great stuff, Isabelle.
Yeah, because, that's why we moved away from printing catalogs we've developed this great tool where people can, as put in all their tasting notes and so on. We're just trying to sort of look at how can we be neutral, because obviously wine is, everybody's traveling and the bottles are traveling. And so it's, I think we need to think about that a bit more.
I don't think anybody could do a better job than you to answer this question, but the fair is attended by consumers. There's obviously the winemakers there. There's trade people, there's media and everything, and whoever else in between. But just describe quickly, when you walk through the doors of, a raw wine fair, just so people can close their eyes, what are they walking into? I've been there. That's why I'm asking you, because it's very bustling and exciting, but, put all the pieces together for me.
Yes, exactly. Well, it is exactly that. I mean, it can be a bit daunting if you've never really been to a wine fair before, but it's probably the best wine fair to attend, I think, because you'll be greeted by 100, 150 growers, all really excited to be, they've traveled from somewhere in Italy or somewhere even on the West Coast, or, from California, to just be there and talk to people. Don't be afraid of asking anything, because I think, that's the whole point of the fair is really about education. So you'll be handed a glass, and you'll have access to the digital catalog, whether you can keep forever, and you can take all your notes. And then you'll go around the room. We'll give you a map where everybody is located. And there's also tons of really amazing talks this year, actually. We're doing a retrospective of Stanko Radicon's work with back vintages from the 90s.
Nice.
We do the same with Stefano Bellotti, Cascina degli Ulivi, and Ernesto Cattel, who also left us from Costa Dila, a while ago. So we're doing a retrospective of their work with, great tastings. So there's a lot of education. I think it's about understanding really what it takes to make these wines, how much farming, how much effort, how much love, how much graft goes into making these wines, and then obviously just enjoying the pure joy of tasting hundreds of different wines, with 100 different personalities.
Yeah, I think one of the great things, and you said it, is as you walk around, the winemakers right there. If you go to Good Ogots, Stephanie and Edward are there. And if you go taste Georgian wines, you meet some crazy people, from Georgia.
Yeah,
so it's really, in your face in a good way.
Yes, and then this year you're going to have even more. I think we have something like 15 Georgian growers traveling from Georgia.
Oh boy, who's keeping an eye on those guys? But one of my other, go ahead.
You will.
Yeah, you sort of answered part of it, but one of my questions was, what are some of the newer wineries or regions, coming to the fair? One of the answers you just gave is Georgia's been there, but now it's coming in a larger force. Any other things to take note of?
Yes, we've got, obviously, like in LA, we've got a really strong domestic representation. We have over, I think, around 35 American growers showing their wines. For me, is really important.
Right.
Because I think LA last year, LA, this is our third year. Last year, we sort of began to see some European buyers come over to LA. And I'm hoping that this year we're going to carry on this, because, in my opinion, wines from the States is very, very underknown and undervalued in Europe. We don't have access to them that easily. So I'm really thrilled that so many U.S. producers are supporting the fair and will be pouring.
Right.
So I think that's really exciting because we tend to think about natural wine, from Europe and Italian and French, but actually what's
for
happening
good reason, but it can, will, and does expand. So, and the U.S. But on a side thing, are the U.S. guys? So there's more of them. Will they participate in the European fairs for that kind of exposure? Or?
Yeah, actually, we're getting quite a lot of people going to Berlin this year.
Great.
Which
it's a very cool market, Berlin.
It is. Maybe you should come.
Yeah, maybe you just gave me an excuse to go to Berlin. I'll take it. All right, so, New York City, big market for the fair, and I'm sure like the other fair markets is taken over by the fair. And I could describe it a little, but I want you to expand. All these winemakers are in town. They all got to eat somewhere. They all got to drink somewhere. There's all these distributors and portfolio guys grabbing them. So basically, when the fair comes into town, it's like this event-laden, event-driven, few days. Give me a little more insight or perspective into, what really happens. I mean, the floodgate opens in a town with these guys, right?
Yeah. This is a very good point. So we put that all under the banner of Raw Wine Week.
Right.
So on our website, we have a map for New York, for LA, for Miami, but also actually we have events happening all around the US because the growers will be, traveling to some other cities, and so all of the events are grouped together, and literally in New York, whether you're in Manhattan or Brooklyn, you'll have, hopefully dozens of events, with growers where they'll be presenting their wines, they'll be doing a talk, they'll be doing a tasting, there'll be a raw wine list takeover.
Right.
So it's a great, it's a, obviously during the day you're busy tasting and working. And then in the evening, there literally are so many events, whether you want something super casual or a bit more formal,
Right.
all of this will be available under the Raw Wine Week website.
And
but
like
yeah,
you said,
it's so great.
they're on the website, so even though there's a little anarchy with all these guys in town, there is some organization, and you do list them on the website. So even if you go to the fair or don't go, there's an opportunity to really stand side by side with a lot of these people. True?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. If you can't make it on the Sunday or the Monday of the fair, in the evenings you can go and visit the restaurants, the bars, meet the growers, drink the wines, enjoy the wines. So it's more than just the fair. There's just like a whole world happening around it.
Well, I think the word world you're right. It's more community, because in New York, there's a ton of large importers, and they have their portfolio tastings, and a lot of these people come into town. I think there's such a huge sense of community with Raw Fair. I think the way you organize it, and it's Raw Wine Week and the events, it just feels very good. And it's a nice thing for the, a raw wine person to experience that. All right, Isabelle, we got to wrap up. But before we wrap up, let's take care of a few things. Again, if anybody wants information about the raw wine fairs, where they are, what time, who's there, cost, any of that, the best place to go is rawwine.com.
So rawwine.com, and then you go and there's all the fairs,
right,
with all the dates and all the information about where the fair is taking place. And in New York,
each fair has its own site.
Yes, each fair has its own site. You can explore all the growers, look at all their wines that they're going to be bringing. Then you can get prepared, and then we'll send access to a catalog a few days before the fair, so you can actually prepare your lists and start exploring the wines, and then getting organized for the actual fair. There'll be an interactive map inside your catalog, so you can really, really prepare for it.
So you're almost saying if you don't do a little homework, you may miss a little. So pay attention, right?
Yes.
It's not a bad thing. Because, when we describe the fair, it can be overwhelming, for some people, 150 tables and wine growers. So if you have an idea of who you want to see first or what's important, that all that information is available. All right, so the next fair where you're doing the North America tour, like we discussed, is Montreal, then New York, then Miami, then LA, right?
That's right. Yeah,
And
starting
in Montreal.
Yeah, on the 24th of November, and then moving around.
Right, and all that is on the site. And don't sit on your butt, because some of these things sell out, or at some point they all sell out, right?
Yes, yeah, that's true. I mean, New York sold out last year. Montreal sold out. Yeah. Miami.
So if you're interested, pay attention and make the move. All right, Isabelle. Just a couple last things. If you have a question, suggestion, wine, happening, or event, hit me up at sam@thegrapenation.com. That's sam@thegrapenation.com. Subscribe to the Grape Nation podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you get your pods. Follow us on Facebook at The Grape Nation. Follow us on Instagram at @SBenRuby, on Twitter at BenRuby. You could always use the hashtag The Grape Nation. A bunch of the information Isabelle and I talked about, I'll post, on our social media sites. So, Isabelle, if people are interested about you have the book, right? It's been updated recently, right?
Yeah, still the book, Natural Wine. It's available easily online.
Right. And what if people want to follow you and Raw Wine on social media?
So our Instagram is Raw Wine World.
Okay.
And
that's the primary outlet, Instagram, for you?
Yeah, Instagram is our primary outlet, because this is how we communicate about the growers or when tickets come on to sell. We're gonna release all the talks next week, the schedule. And it will be sort of pretty much first come, first serve. If you want to book a space, some of them you'll have to register. So we'll announce that on Instagram.
Right. So that's Raw Wine at Raw Wine World. All right, Isabelle, I want to thank you very much for taking the time out. I think it's important to talk to you. I think what you're doing is important. That's why I have you on. I want to thank our engineer, Matt, for helping out today. And I want to thank everyone at the Heritage Radio Network. I'm Sam Ben-Ruby, and you've been listening to The Grape Nation. The Grape Nation is powered by Simplecast. Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food radio supported by you. For our freshest content, subscribe to our newsletter. Enter your email at the bottom of our website, heritageradionetwork.org. Connect with us on Instagram and Twitter at heritage_radio. You can also find us at facebook.com/Heritage Radio Network. Heritage Radio Network is a nonprofit organization driving conversations to make the world a better, fairer, more delicious place. And we couldn't do it without support from listeners like you. Want to be part of the food world's most innovative community? Subscribe to the shows you like, tell your friends, and please join the HRN family by becoming a member. Just click on the beating heart at the top right of our homepage. And thanks for listening.